No, I understand.
Yeah. So
Thank you. Are you guys rolling? Thank you so much. So we're officially on the record. Anything you say now will and may be used against. Everything on this show is alleged and apparent and hypothetical. Sis Phapano Phasha, I'm honored to have you on the panel show. I think I was meant to have you here last year after we sat on Dope Conversations. And schedules, the elections, and everything have been a mess. But I'm honored that you actually reached out to me and you pushed for us to sit again. I need to give a special mention to Umam Zanele Ntuli, who always makes magic happen, who blessed and anointed this episode for today. Before we start, how are you doing? What did you think of the elections just generally? And are you in good health?
thank you so much, Penuel. Well, I'm good. I've never been better, despite what's happening in the country.
Hey, son.
Yes, I think everything happens for a reason.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. What did you think of the elections? Sorry, this is a backup to get our voices in case anything happens to footage. It's not the CIA. Well, the CIA listens to everything, but besides that, I'm just recording our voices as well. Your general thoughts about the elections?
Well, I think in the main, elections were let me just start with the ANC. I think for the first time, the ANC did not really have an economic policy where they attempted to influence or persuade the voters on why they should have voted them back into power, to the extent that they were, running gimmicks in terms of their election strategy. So I was extremely disappointed with the ANC because despite the limitations and what we can say about the governing party, I'm sure they've made some inroads since the last elections, unless it was an admittance from their side that they had failed. But they did not really do much to influence voters. But in the main, shocked, especially with the Western Cape. I still don't believe that the DA got the number of votes that we saw projected. I also don't believe that Gauteng, the ANC in Gauteng, got the numbers that we saw. I think Panyaza Lesufi did extremely well. It might be a perception, but when one was observing, and remember there was 2 hours of the screen going off. But I think Panyaza Lesufi did extremely well, and I hope that there was no level of sabotage.
Okay, sorry, Khomoto.
No, I just want to get the mic closer.
No problem. Thank you, sir.
Just let me know when. How about that?
So
Not a problem. Please feel free.
Also, we have to start afresh.
No.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
We're uncut and unfiltered.
I thought we were going to start on the black dilemma.
We can start wherever you want. By the way, we're rolling. This is all going to be on screen.
Really?
Yeah, we're not going to cut. Please feel free. We can carry on. Walu Mama's gone to get her phone. So the ANC hit just over 40%, and I'm listening to you speaking about Tupanyas and doing well. Do you think you still have some love for the ANC? Your heart is still like wanting them to do well?
Always.
You're one of those people who's like, I'll be ANC, even if I leave, my heart will always somehow, my first love, what I was born into.
It's not even about first love or anything of that nature. The ANC, I believe, remains the key instrument for social transformation. It does not necessarily mean that since it has been infiltrated, then the organization is the problem.
Yeah. Mama, please come through.
There are individuals within the ANC who are problematic, and there are many. However, the idea, I do not believe that there is no organization when it comes to policies, when it comes to ideas that surpass the African National Congress. So that's where I stand. And I also don't believe that I have to be in the ANC for me to, continue having this, not necessarily sympathy, but knowledge about what the ANC has done and its own weaknesses.
I agree with you with that. The DA didn't do as well as they thought. And they kind of sort of vaguely not really talking about it, because their whole reason for getting rid of Musi Maimane was their results. And Johnston Hazen didn't do better than Umusi. But nothing's being said. And I've just come to learn that politics is it's a lot of lying. PR, propaganda, and lies, and I've just kind of let it go. Where would you like us to start for today, now that I know that you're good and your general thoughts about the elections?
On the black dilemma, yeah. On the
Hit me.
black dilemma.
I'm here. We're here for you. By the way, I just need to make a mention, and I'm sure you saw the comments. After we sat on Dope Conversations, a lot of people were hungry to hear more from you. Protect this lady, especially because you called me out and how I move and some of my friends, which we'll speak about later. But I just want to say thank you, for the service you give to this country, for the people of this country, especially Black people, because it comes through in the things you say and in the work that you do, that you're actually passionate about trying to fix the ills of the inherited ills of Black people and poor people generally in this country. So ngiyabonga, just from my side and on behalf of the audience. So yeah, the black dilemma, what is that?
Yeah.
According to you?
No, thank you. Actually, that's the reason why I did not want to come back so quickly and have a sit up with you, because I was just not comfortable with some of the comments, but I actually I understood. Now on the black dilemma, I think in the context of South Africa and the African continent, we are still refusing to accept that those whom we consider as our liberators would never do anything within the confines of white acceptance. We are still confined to believing that those who stayed, they fought for us, and those who actually fought for us will liberate us.
Yeah.
So I think in the main, that is the black dilemma. I mean, we have observed, if you look at the independence of countries in the continent, we have not really moved as Africans. And what we have primarily seen is that, there's been a level of transformation within the African continent. But if you take countries like China and India, which have, tripled the population of our continent and less of the resources that we have, how far these countries have moved. And also, if you look at these very countries, they've also been colonized. And if you look at China in particular and India, they were also colonized by the British. So
China was colonized.
Yes, China was colonized to the extent that even the Japanese, they actually invaded or attempted to invade China. And then there was the Opium, War and so forth. So
opium.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember those wars, sure.
Yes. So now we expect African leaders to liberate us. And they've clearly demonstrated they do not have the capacity to liberate us. They fear the West. They fear white people. But now the question is, what are we doing about it? Or what are we going to do about it? And perhaps it also speaks to South Africa. We know that we have what we call a government of national unity. And within that government, you've got white people who have gone into a coalition with the African National Congress, which positions itself as a liberation movement. But this liberation movement has gone into a coalition with a party that has demonstrated how racist and colonial it is. And one is not making up the story. I mean, you have the leader of the party who has said that white people civilized us, Europeans civilized us.
Speaking about Koko Helen Zille and the DA.
Yes. And when you observe, this is also a party which is mainly made up of illiterates.
Illiterates?
Yes. People like
you speak about the DA?
The DA, the leadership of the DA. In comparison to black leaders from the ANC, if you look at Sputla, Minister Sputla,
Ramaphosa,
yes,
the Minister of Electricity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you look at Lamola and many...
Ronald Lamola, is he still the Minister of Justice? Was he been moved?
No, he's now international relations, yes. So if you look at David Masondo and the caliber of leaders that the ANC has produced, and you compare them to the leaders of the DA, whom some of them do not even have matric certificates. So you can tell that the ANC itself does not take the liberation project seriously, and neither does it take the transformation agenda seriously. And this does not only end here, as I said. It goes to the African continent, because our leaders are not prepared to go outside of what they know, and that is white acceptance. That is the acceptance of the West. So For me, as you know, I read a lot, I listen a lot. But what mainly frustrates me is we know what the challenges are, but we're not prepared to do anything because we have allowed these political leaders to be the ones who, decide what must happen. And clearly they failed. So I just made an example with this GNU. It's a disastrous marriage, toxic marriage. But none of us are saying anything. I mean, there are people who voted for the ANC, but they've not questioned the ANC because it means that the president of the ANC, President Cyril Ramaphosa, actually lied to the voters because it is quite evident that he anticipated this coalition. But he did not tell those who voted the ANC based on its manifesto that he was going to go to bed with this imperialists, with this racist. He never did that. Now we are stuck with an organization that is anti-Black economic empowerment, that is anti-transformation. So again, it goes back to this. What is the Black agenda? And that's what I've been trying to figure out. The Black agenda outside of political parties, because clearly there's no single political party that is going to save us. And that is my final analysis, that all political parties now are in parliament and they've got salaries for the next 5 years. They're going to be debating. They're going to come back after 5 years, to make more promises. But in the main, the lives of ordinary Black people are not going to change. And from our side, we don't know how to produce, we consume. So we are going to be stuck in this dilemma in South Africa and the continent.
Yeah, that's a lot. So I stand to be corrected. I think China's population is probably at about 1.3 billion, somewhere there, 1.4 billion. India's population might be 1.2.
Above China.
Above China,
Yeah.
Over 1.4 billion.
India is now the most populous nation in the world.
Jeez. The African continent, if we were to imagine it as a United States of Africa, has got over 1 billion people. I'm not sure what the number is there. So it is worth comparing. And the sadness of, yes, the development and the progress China has made, the development and the progress that India's making. There are a lot of people that aren't aware of how much India's putting in work, not just in India, but their influence around the world. A lot of Silicon Valley companies, your Googles, etc., are being headed by Indians. So it's become very sad for someone like myself to see what's happened to the African continent. The Black dilemma, to what you're saying, is essentially a liberation party is my parents. And my parents are promising us a better life. A better life because we've been oppressed by certain white neighbors or white people that have come into our home. And now that our parents have negotiated, sadly, it's not that they won, they negotiated some kind of settlement. You have a situation where our parents are now laughing with those same people. And when we, their children, are trying to raise issues, point out something, they explain to us that it's complicated, it's whatever, and we're still not happy. And we're at a point now as a country, maybe as a continent, where our parents are starting to look like the people that oppressed us, because even we as their children are trying to make progress. They become the ones to block us. Whether they say it's their friends they've made under a coalition or government of national unity, or the people that funded them to improve their lives, or the West, or whoever that they claim to be scared of, or they don't even tell us, we can see it. Are we naive? You spoke about African leaders not having the capacity to liberate. They claim to have liberated us from whatever we had. They negotiated to what we have now. Capacity is one thing, but do they have the desire? Do they actually have a desire? And it's worse when you've tasted, I guess, the African American European dream. You live in a mansion, your kids go to top private schools, you get driven around with security, you can travel anywhere in the world, you're friends with wealthy people of all types of races and nations. Would I have a desire to change this now? And what would it look like? Because I might lose the little bit that I have.
No, thank you. I think also we must accept that African leaders are an obstacle to the African agenda. And I'll tell you why. The insinuation that they are hamstrung, they cannot do much, that they are obligated to the IMF or the World Bank or to the West, it's far from the truth. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if you take countries that you have mentioned, if you take India, if you take China, if you take Singapore, you take Japan, all those countries also rely on the International Monetary Fund, and not to a huge extent, though. But what a country like India does, and your Prime Minister Modi or Xi Jinping, what they've developed is what they call, or what is centered around national interest. So theirs is not a political program that is focused on the interest of the West or on their own personal interest, but interest that is focused on the strategic interest of the people of those countries. Yeah. And African leaders do not have that desire to liberate their own people. So I think, as you rightly say, there is simply no desire by African leaders, to collectively liberate Africans. And there is nothing that, they need. They've got the mineral resources, and they continue, to take our resources to the continent. And I mean, if you take, and I want to make an example with India and the recent visit that Putin, Prime Minister Modi had an engagement with Putin. And then after that, the US, through its different agencies, released a statement stating that Prime Minister Modi must take a stand. It was either he is with the US or he is with Russia. In fact, it was this week where they said that it's either the press secretary spoke, their officials from the office of the president, they said that it's either you support the United States of America or you support Russia. And
you're either an ally or the enemy.
Yeah, no. What India said was that it's not our war. We might be getting support from the US because in reality, if it's not for the United States, India would not be where it is. Yeah. I mean, you make an example of Silicon Valley. You look at the Fortune 500 companies. The majority of them are led by Indians, be it Indian Americans or those of Indian descent. Sure. But India has a stand that it will take a posture and it will not be dictated upon even those who give it money. And it's the same thing as China.
China's also done the same.
Yes. Yeah. And remember, China did not develop out of a vacuum. China, I mean, it was very decisive after the death of Chairman Mao, when the late leader, the great reformist, Deng, decided that China was now going to open up. And he called it reform and opening up. And he decided to open up to the United States. He decided to open up to the countries which had done extremely well. So our leaders, they're disingenuous,
Deng Xiaoping.
Yes, Deng Xiaoping.
Yeah.
So if you look at all these leaders, they've been decisive on what they want to do for their countries. Yeah. Yes, and even if you look at the new leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, very decisive. You also take the biggest banks in the world, for example. The top 4 banks in the world are from China, and all of them are owned by the states. So there's a lot of decisiveness. And key to that, as I said, is ensuring that they liberate their people from economic slavery. They also, one of the things that China's also done is to move more than 800 million out of poverty. It has never been done anywhere else in the world. Yet they are doing it. And how they are doing it is to ensure that there are market reforms. But at the same time, the state intervention in Africa is totally different. The state is used to benefit a few families who are politically connected. Correct. Yes, as well as, in our case, primarily white people. And in other parts of the continent is, imperialist forces. So that's the unfortunate story of Africa. But then we know the story. And for me is, what are we doing about it? So for me, I think that's, as I said, that's what bothers me and interests me, that we know our challenge. We know that our fathers and our mothers have betrayed us. We also know that their own children have got generational wealth. We also know that at some point, if anything were to go wrong, they can leave the continent
Yeah.
and go to Europe, go to the West, and we'll be stuck in this continent with nothing. So that is the biggest challenge, and we really need to find solutions before it's too late.
You spoke about how the leaders of Africa are not pushing the African agenda. What is the African agenda according to you? Who sets the African agenda? Who has the power to change it? Because maybe someone could argue that they are pushing the African agenda. They're the ones that set it. They are the ones that changed it and decided that we will become servants of the IMF, the World Bank. We will serve the West, and Africans will just be good to be social grant, social welfare recipients, and we must just keep quiet while the rest of the world loots the mineral resources. What is the African agenda according to you, and who sets it and who can change it?
Yeah, I think I've spoken about Muammar Gaddafi with you, General Muammar Gaddafi.
Yeah, leader of Libya, who was murdered under the Barack Obama administration in the USA.
Yes, and key to one of his pedagogies, like knowledge sharing and so forth, was on the issue of participatory and consultative leadership. And unfortunately, what has not happened in the context of the continent is no one has actually spoken to us on where the continent must actually go to.
Yeah.
However, there were leaders at a particular time, your Julius Nyerere and your Kenneth Kaunda, who would go to their respective constituencies just to get, what we would call direction or directives on what ought to happen in the context of the continent. So their African agenda has obviously been taking Africa, taking the continent from where it is and transforming the continent into a superpower that we know it is.
It should be.
It should be, because if you look at the minerals, just the minerals in the continent.
Just alone, before we look at other things, because there are other things as well. There's produce, there's our creative talents, just the minerals on their own.
Just the minerals on their own. But I think key to this is one of the resource that Africa has is a young workforce, a prospective young workforce.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the two countries that I've mentioned with the highest population in the world, what makes them thrive is that they have a huge population. So they can extract, revenue from that population. So they can use their population as a workforce. Now, in the continent, we have young people. And if you have a visionary leadership, it can take those young people and turn them into a workforce. Now, what has happened is that we have young people who have been turned into a human waste. They're hopeless, they're helpless. Our leaders in the continent are not utilizing young people. I mean, if you take India, for example, what they've done is they are leading the digital revolution. And behind that digital revolution is ensuring all young people are equipped in terms of IT, fintech, and so on. So we have people who can be turned into a human potential. I mean, if you take Nigerians, for an example, if you look at the US, if you look at the UK, they are leading, they have surpassed even, Americans, white Americans in the medical space. If you take Nigerians in the UK, they have surpassed, the natives of the UK.
Some Nigerians are doing really well globally.
They are doing quite well. And interestingly, I picked up that in
Lithuania.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. I've picked up that the country is actually utilizing Nigerians in their IT space. So they're attempting to create their own Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And we are not doing anything, I mean, IT is the future. We know that. But there's absolutely nothing that we are doing to harness the skills, that Africans actually have. Because we know, especially West Africans, even if you take Ghanaians are doing extremely well throughout the world. If you take Zimbabweans, the actuaries that come from Zimbabwe, if you take Zambia, if you take Malawi, the type of, learners, the type of graduates that come out from the African continent. Now, imagine if a country like South Africa, which is lacking in terms of skills or some skills, if they go to the continent and harness all the skills, what will happen instead of your friend Gayton McKenzie saying, Mabahambi? Because now the other challenge is because one would assume that Gayton has traveled, but when he speaks, it seems as if he's not well traveled, because anyone who knows the African continent will tell you of the expertise in the continent, to the extent that if you go to the African continent, despite the misery and the challenges, in the continent, they own their own banks, they own the financial service sector, and which is what we cannot even start in South Africa. As you know, we are consumers. We don't own any bank as Black people in South Africa.
Got TymeBank.
Yes.
TymeBank.
No, you know.
Sorry, please carry on.
Yeah, we've spoken about that. So now you've got a Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture who then says, Mabahambe. He doesn't even know that Africans in South Africa spend billions. And they're not even consumers, they're producing. If you go to Sandton, they've got offices in Sandton. So it then gives you, and it might be correct or incorrect, it might be deliberate, it might be a political strategy on the side of Minister Gayton McKenzie. But it shows the ignorance, the level of ignorance by some of the politicians in South Africa who do not even understand that South Africa is part of the continent, that South Africa cannot function outside of the continent. But lastly, on this issue, when the argument is made that they are taking our jobs, what jobs are those? Does it mean that as South Africans, we are meant to be domestic workers, to be gardeners? Because that is the assumption. So I think, as I had said, the African agenda, all the Black agenda, primarily lies with us, especially as professionals, as academics, and as business people, because there is no politician, unfortunately. They do not have the conviction. They don't believe in meritocracy. We can't even compare them to the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, your BJP in India, or in Singapore. They are just, we will be scraping the barrel if we think that African leaders are going to save us. But there's hope.
On behalf of Gayton McKenzie, I'm not Gayton's spokesperson, and I'm not a spokesperson of people that support #Abahambe. So I asked about the African agenda. You've given me a small glimpse. You didn't really answer my question, but I'll assume from what you said that the African agenda is meant to be set by constituencies, being the people on the ground. And I'll assume from what you were saying that generically what we'd like to see is an African agenda which allows Africa to develop like other nations, using our mineral resources, using our workforce, which is lying dormant and has been turned into human waste. I guess the people who can maybe change it, drive it, are meant to be politicians, which they are not. They are actually gatekeepers to progress. And that's one of the things we need to speak about. And maybe whether today or another point, we need to ask, if not politicians, are there other people that can drive an African agenda? Business people, people that run nonprofit organizations, maybe priests and pastors might use the church to drive the agenda. I don't know. We've got a situation in this country, and this is not me defending. I just have to state it because you raised it and you said Gayton is my friend. A lot of South Africans, what you call a constituency, are very frustrated with foreigners that are here, specifically illegal foreigners or what's called undocumented foreigners. Because there was a scramble for Africa. The colonizers all took their little piece, whether it was Belgium, Britain, France, Italy, Germany, and they built colonial borders, which in 2024, Black Africans still kind of respect, even though we claim to be liberated. And with those borders, Africans cannot travel freely through the continent. You need a passport. In certain countries, you need a visa. We need to give a shout out to Ghana. They've now scrapped a fee. And they scrapped it weeks after I left Ghana because I had to pay to get in there. But it's still there. And what South Africans are frustrated with is this idea that the rest of Africa wants South Africa to be open borders and conducive, but we can't do the same in their nations. They respect colonial borders, but we mustn't respect the ones that we have. And with that, because South Africa's been a developed economy for a long time, maybe we got the best colonizers who put in work. A lot of Africans come here. Because to what you're saying, there are many talented Africans. African expats, which do very well around the world. Nigerians, some Kenyans, some South Africans, Zimbabweans, you're very right. And they thrive in conducive environments, of which South Africa, I guess, becomes more conducive than other places. The argument that Gayton makes, and it's not his, by the way, Herman Mashaba was pushing it as a DA mayor. Other people have jumped on the bandwagon because they saw that it scores some political points. The argument is go fix your own place, which I think is part of what you're asking about now. Because celebrating Nigerians in the UK and in America, when Nigeria is a mess, you have to ask questions, number one. And number two, we have to assume that the Nigerians in America and the UK are not there illegally. And that becomes the fight. That's not me defending either side. It's just me stating what I think the issues are.
But Penuel, speaking out, let's start with Nigeria.
Sure.
Who has extracted or who continues to extract minerals from Nigeria and all these countries in the continent? And let me just speak about when we say they must go back, but also the issue of borders. Now, there's a scramble in South Africa for Africa's cheap labor. And the borders could be closed or the borders could be managed.
100%.
Why are they not being managed? Because there's a scramble for Africa's cheap labor. Look, the assumption that whatever we see is new, it's not. It's far from the truth. You say that you said colonizers who put in work. What we have, the infrastructure that we have in South Africa, including the creation, the wealth creation that white people made in South Africa, was not because of good work. They had to go to Lesotho, they had to go to Malawi, they had to go to Zambia and use the men in those countries as cheap labor. So now they cannot use us, the black majority, as cheap labor because there are laws in place.
Correct.
So they open these borders so that Africans can come in so that they can exploit them.
You're 100% correct.
Yes. So the challenge in the main, I mean, I'm quite sure that many of the poor people from the African continent, especially from SADC region, they would love to stay in their countries.
Sure.
They would not want to come here. Why would you want to travel this far to become a domestic...
In a hostile space where the people don't want you there.
And become a domestic worker. Now, there's an assumption also that we are the biggest recipients of migrants or undocumented migrants. Well, it's actually not. It's not the entire truth, because if you take a country like Uganda, it's the country which has the biggest number of asylum seekers, and then you've got other countries around the DRC, around Burundi, which are also receiving asylum seekers. But then again, we're not asking the right questions. You take the DRC as an example. It's 2 borders away from South Africa. The minerals in the DRC are being stolen. And
with the assistance of politicians?
Yes. South African politicians.
Well, that's one of the arguments,
yes,
which is why we have soldiers there dying.
The people, yes, the soldiers are being sent by our own government so that they can go and protect the interests of South African business people, South African politicians. Children in the DRC are dying, women are being raped. We don't care about that. There is no person from Congo who wants to come here. That is the wealthiest nation in the world, the entire world. Yet our people are stealing their minerals so that they can develop themselves. Not even South Africans, because we are not beneficiaries here. That's why we are saying they're taking our jobs, because ours is to fight for, breadcrumbs. So you can even take a country like Nigeria. I'm not sure if you're aware that the company which has overtaken all the companies in Nigeria in the aluminium space, it's actually the Oppenheimer family.
In Nigeria?
In Nigeria. Now, imagine how many Nigerians are there. The can industry now in Nigeria is owned by a white South African family. And
the what can?
The can industry. Can, yes. Cans, aluminium,
Okay.
yes. And that's not the only example. If you look at the retail industry there, if you look at some of the key industries in West Africa, throughout the continent, it's South Africans who are there. And then you have all these foreign powers. And what are we doing? We are exploiting those countries. The people in those countries are not benefiting. But far worse, we also instigate wars in some of these countries so that these wars will never find peace, so that these wars, will never be able to govern themselves.
You're saying South Africans instigate wars?
Yes. I mean, take the DRC again. Patrice Lumumba, the role of Anglo-American in the DRC because of its uranium. The role of Anglo again in Japan in relation to the atomic bomb. So you have a situation where we as South Africa, because of white capital in particular, it's extracting from the African continent. And we expect the continent to thrive when we are also a problem. As I said, there is no African or there is no man, a self-respecting man who would want to come to South Africa and leave their home so that they can be disrespected and called names. So I think for me, that's where we are. But lastly, you speak of Herman Mashaba, you speak of Gayton. When last did Gayton speak of white monopoly capital?
Has he even spoken about it?
Yes. Okay.
No, I'm just asking.
No, okay. Oh. I give him the benefit of the doubt, sure. By the way. You've got people who are funded.
Oh, and Herman doesn't support BEE.
Yes.
You spoke about it earlier.
And he's from Mozambique.
Uban.
Oh, his father's from Mozambique, Herman Mashaba. So you've got politicians who are funded by white people who speak about undocumented migrants because they would not want us to speak about the core problem in South Africa, which is the fact that we do not own the economy. So we have to blame these undocumented immigrants, who are a problem, by the way, because our government refuses, to manage the borders. But if you divert us from talking about the real challenges, yes, we're going to speak about these people. I mean, if they wanted to, they can just put these people in a bus and take them back to their countries, but they're not doing that because they're exploiting them. But at the same time, white people are paying political parties to ensure that they push a narrative which, ensures that we don't speak about the means of production. So that's where we are in South Africa. We obviously are obsessed with this narrative about migrants because who is going to push the narrative about their real issues and our real conditions, that we are merely consumers, that white people don't want us to be producers, that white people want to use or continue to use Africans as cheap labor. Those are realities that we are not prepared to speak about because, I'm all for putting all these people in a bus and taking them back to their respective countries. I'm all for that. As long as we do that and we come back and we speak to the real issues, because the real issue is bangithathela umsebenzi as a waitress. It's not, in our own country with diamonds, with all these minerals, we want to, become, as I said, waitresses in our own country because white people want to divert us. White people don't want us to talk about their economy that they do not want to include us in. So for me, I think that's the fundamental issue or concern that we should be obsessing about as Black South Africans.
I'm worried about debating with you because I've got so many comebacks to some of the things you've said because it's complex and layered. And some of the hypocrisies that you are raising as well. And it's not for me to defend politicians or people that run agendas because I'm at a point in my life where I don't care as much. I realize people don't really care about themselves. I'll take it a bit back to the African agenda and the blame on so-called liberators and leaders and their failure. and the blame on specifically the West and how they continue to use various strategies to keep people oppressed, passive, have gatekeepers. The people also need to take blame themselves. You spoke very fondly. Number one, you spoke about the workforce that we have or the potential. You spoke about the talent that is shining elsewhere and conducive environments. And I spoke about South Africa being a potentially conducive environment. And then you spoke about the foreigners we have here and how many of them don't want to be here. But they aren't conducive environments where they come from. Similar arguments could be made about the Nigerians you're speaking about very well in the UK, in America. Maybe they also don't want to be there. They wish they were in Nigeria. And someone would be like, then they must go home. And I'm saying, people like Abo Gates and say go home. And it's like, you can't tell us to go home. It's not great. It's not conducive. There are agendas. In the South African context, you've got the Xhosa nation. Same way you speak about Zimbabweans, same way you speak about Nigerians, highly educated. They are advocates, they are engineers, they are, they speak the best English in this country. Then you look at the Eastern Cape. They're almost expats of the Eastern Cape, and they have failed to uplift where they come from. In the same way, Nigerians have failed to fix Nigeria. So the African agenda is tricky because, number one, I don't think Africans are united, number one. Number two, and I've asked this of about Dr. Uma Ifatunde, I've asked this of about Joshua Maponga, can white people be Africans and? You're speaking about the Oppenheimers, and I agree with you. I think Anglo-American is the biggest mafia company we've had on the continent. And it's passed over the baton or parts of the baton to companies like Glencore, etc. But for all intents and purposes, the Oppenheimers will tell you they're Africans. So when they set up in Nigeria, we should be celebrating South African success. If Christo Visa sets up ShopRite in Nigeria, we should be celebrating South African success. And if you are going to claim that Africa should be one thing, then it shouldn't matter if it's so-called Africans or if it stays in South Africa, so to speak. And maybe my last point before you come in is, what would be the difference between Nikki Oppenheimer, Christo Visa, Aliko Dangote, Patrice Motsepe? Because if we're going to speak about black success, black excellence, which we want, which we claim we want, when I make an example like TymeBank, we don't have black banks, we are consumers. And I'm like, but Patrice is producing. You'll have a comeback. If the Oppenheimers are operating in Nigeria, and I'm like, but Aliko Dangote is also a producer there. Why is that not good enough? Because whether it's politically connected or otherwise, there are black people, Herman Mashaba himself with Black Like Me, who have put their hands up and who have produced however it came. And is that not good enough?
Okay. I think I just want to give you this scenario.
Yeah.
In China, there are private companies. Those private companies are monitored by the state.
Correct.
At any given time, if the state comes to a conclusion that these companies are parasitic, those companies can be shut down. If the state comes to a conclusion that those companies are not in the interest of the people of China, then the state can close down those companies. It's not the same in the African continent. I mean, you speak of, I guess you're just making an example. You speak of the Oppenheimers being Africans. Please show us exactly, what have Oppenheimers done in our continent, which shows that they've got an interest in our continent. I can tell you now that if you look at Anglo-American and if you look at DBS, those two companies have mainly benefited Israel.
Now you're saying most of the profits they've made here have left the continent.
That is why, at a particular point, Israel was the center of the diamond industry.
That is correct.
Yes. So Oppenheimers, and we've spoken about this, Oppenheimers and the Jewish community work for Zionists. They work for Zionist Israeli. They don't work for South Africa. They don't work in the interest of South Africa or in the interest of the continent. So we cannot identify them.
Am I allowed to intervene?
No. Let me.
Okay. No problem.
Yeah. I think I deserve to finish.
No problem.
Yes. For us to call them or to identify them as Africans, there must be quantitative revenue that we derive from these families. And what we have derived from these families is wars, is squalor, is segregation. The same thing that's happening in Palestine. But ours is different because they've extracted our minerals, be it in South Africa, be it in Botswana, be it in the DRC. So we cannot consider them Africans because every time they get money, they take the dividends, they take the profits outside of the continent and they take them to develop Europe and the US. No different to Vise and many others. By the way, Penuel, if you recall, during apartheid, these white people did not have a problem with state-owned entities. And they did not have a problem with this SOEs benefiting white people. But when a black party came into power, they then started to dismantle these SOEs.
With the help of those black leaders?
Yes, with the help of those black leaders. They are doing that now. So it clearly shows that these white people do not have the interest of black people because these SOEs were created to develop and to change the lives of white people. But now, when the same thing is supposed to happen with the black majority, they're now starting to dismantle these SOEs.
Yeah.
So these people do not have our interest. They, in fact, benefit from a divided continent. You said, you asked Dr. Uma and others if Africans can be united. Yes, Africans can be united, but it cannot happen when there are external forces which do not want us to unite. But it can happen if we decide that we're not going to listen to these external forces anymore. We're not going to allow the Oppenheimer family to control political parties in the continent. Because, and in closing on this matter, the other thing that the Oppenheimer family through Brenner's Foundation is doing is that they are slowly infiltrating the African continent to the extent that if you look at Brenhurst, their primary advisors, they are former African leaders. That's how they have made inroads into the continent. That's why in Zambia, the president of Zambia is controlled by Brenhurst. If you go to the continent, throughout the continent, and it's many countries which have not, which have stopped them, but they are putting these monies that they stole from the continent and putting them into political parties so that they control politics. Because if they control politics, they then control the investments. They then control the economic policies. So now you have a problem that you've got these white people who do not care about you and I. They care about aesthetics. They care about the skylines and the facade, but they don't care about economic transformation of the black majority and Africans in the continent. Because if you start putting money, resources, and infrastructure on the people of the continent, then the continent can transform. There's nothing that stops Africa from transforming. It is only those who have money who do not want to put money into the continent. And then you have, as you obviously say, you've got these politicians. Many of them are capital controlled. They are given monies. And, I was the other time, 2 weeks ago and a day before, I was actually looking back at, I'm not sure if you know, a gentleman who passed on, Sidney Frankel.
No.
Okay. Sidney was this billionaire who introduced, and it's there even if you read the autobiography of...
Where is he from, sorry?
He was a South African.
Okay.
Yes. So Sidney is the white man who introduced President Ramaphosa to his friend Rolf Meyer.
Okay.
Yes. And it is noted, it has even been written that Sidney, and I find it fascinating that Sidney loved young boys.
Oh.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, no.
He was
I'm listening to you. I don't know him, so...
Yes, he passed on. He died.
Yeah.
But it is stated that he was a pedophile. And
I've heard a lot of rumors about very successful people in this
Yes.
country, business people and politicians.
yeah, but before he actually died, there were white people who actually gathered to actually expose this man
Yeah.
and expose him that when they were young boys, when they were young girls, he actually molested them.
Yeah.
And if you also go back, I mean, if you read the book that was written by the former policeman who speaks on pedophilia in the African community, but particularly in the state, the Lost Boys.
Sure.
Yes. So you then wonder.
Our own Epstein Island.
Yes.
Sure.
Then, and remember, he was killed. He mysteriously died. Now, if you look at our leaders, then you ask yourself, people say that they've been captured, but what is the extent of this capture? You know, this capital controlled leaders. What exactly do these white people in the West have on them? Well, you can, make some assumption. You can reach some conclusion, but then you ask yourself, in 1996, when the ANC finalized the constitution, the first thing that was in the constitution was gay rights. First thing, we were the first country in the world to actually constitutionalize homosexuality.
Oh, South Africa's progressive. Siyabonga. Thank you.
No land, no economy. Homosexual rights.
Thank you, Desmond Tutu. Siyabonga.
No, it was not even Desmond Tutu, by the way.
No, I know he's been one of the activists. I think one of his children
But the chair,
homosexual.
the person who was responsible in Parliament for the constitution was President Ramaphosa.
Aibo. What are you saying here now?
No, I'm not.
Hey,
No.
what's going on?
But yes. So now you ask yourself, why such obsession on civil liberties? And what motivated these civil liberties, if not for these white people who pushed our leaders to ensure that they pushed the civil liberties and not economic freedoms?
Must we read between the lines from what you're saying?
No. Our leaders might not have done anything, but I am saying.
But you're giving us dots. Must we not connect them?
No. You may not connect the dots, but what I'm putting to you is that these leaders, these multimillionaires and others who supported our leaders, they are the ones who could have influenced our leaders. Because why would you, as a black person in 1996, of all the rights, I mean, you have been fighting for the land. That's the most single idea that you've been fighting for. And the first thing that you do when you get into power is to focus on gay rights. I mean,
so we mustn't connect the dots.
I'm not saying you must connect. Do not connect the dots.
Let me go
Yes.
through my notes. I've got notes here. Ish. Maybe I must actually just respect my notes because I raise some of them, I don't raise others.
Okay, please.
Number one, we've got notes.
Yeah.
So let's go through our notes and then I'll go through mine. The black dilemma, which you've spoken about, which we actually need to unpack because that's most important. The lie that is politics and politicians, which is ongoing in what we're speaking about. The one is what we can learn from white organizations, which right now it seems like there's nothing.
No, we can.
This might, now we'll bring it up later. I'm going to revisit. We'll go back and see what we covered and what haven't.
No, there's actually a lot that we can learn.
How to split black people according to values and not race. That was probably my point. How to find non-black allies. Let me go through my notes because I know I won't be able to get through everything.
Don't skip that part of what we can learn from.
No problem. No, I'm just saying because we'll deviate and then we'll start speaking about Frankel and gay rights and then start asking questions about certain leaders.
No.
Jeez. I'm just raising notes that you don't have to counter them.
Okay.
It's up to you. You spoke about Uganda, I think Burundi, and asylum seekers, which I wanted to distinguish between illegal foreigners because we also have refugees and asylum seekers.
No, I get that. I know the difference.
I'm raising notes.
Oh, okay.
But you can counter while I'm...
Okay.
If you want.
No, continue.
I was just raising it as these are the things that upset ordinary black South Africans when, let's say you and other people like you are going to be like, but look at the situation. And umuntu oyihlalele emkhukhwini ethembisa is like, I don't care. I don't want these people here and we have laws. So you can call them asylum seekers and we're not number one. Asnendaba bahambe. And that's what Abo Herman and Abo Gayton were writing. And I do agree that many elite people, including white business people, benefit from illegal foreigners here. My other link was going to be on America, African slaves, and Mexicans. Because as you correctly put it, in South Africa, as soon as we got labor laws, black labor became expensive. Or at least South African black labor became expensive. And that's when there was an import of foreign labor, even if it had to be legal. That's why your Helen Suzman Foundation and the others will fight. In America, something similar happened. When black people got liberated that side with their rights, that's when there was an influx of Mexicans, which we see today. And then you have to compare that because in capitalist societies, you almost always need slave labor. And it's part of the danger of you saying Africa is a potential workforce. It's according to whose standards? Because exploited labor is also a workforce. China enslaved its own people. Some people debate with me and I'm like, but you see the exploitation, you see white people enforced on blacks, Chinese people enforced on their own. But it was for their national agenda, which will then be like, if your mom overworks you at home, it's for the benefit of the family. India to this day has still got a caste system, where they in essence have slaves. And some people could argue these are the things that allow these companies to progress. And in South Africa could progress from an economic perspective when black peoples were enslaved, except they were enslaved by white people, so then it looks bad. Maybe if they were enslaved by black people, we'll be speaking another story. We've got an exploitation problem that's just a capitalist problem, which we need to discuss generally.
It's a white problem.
We can call it white, definitely, because they introduced this type of thing to us, I think. Because again, when I raise people like Patrice Motsepe, Aliko Dangote, who are meant to be black success stories, I would want to compare and contrast if their wealth is being built any differently from any white wealth. Are they overpaying their black workers or are they benefiting in the same ways? The DRC is a point that really needs to be discussed forever. You spoke about Israel. There's an Israeli Jewish gentleman who is one of the biggest capturers in the DRC called Dan Gertler. Mm-hmm. He's quite popularly known. He also went in through the diamond industry. A very big funder of the Kabila family, the father and the son. I put here Black Bank because, I still want to ask this question. Why is TymeBank a problem when we raise the concept of a black bank? Why is it not good enough that Patrice Motsepe as a black South African has a black bank? What exactly are we looking for? I think I'll stop there with my notes.
Okay.
We can continue.
Okay, no, thank you. Now, you make a valid points.
Yeah.
But now, here's the problem. Herman Mashaba speaks about undocumented migrants or foreigners, as we would call them. Yet he takes money from the same people who support Helen Suzman Foundation to take our government to court. A government which wants to deal with migration governance. Helen Suzman takes it to court so that the same undocumented migrants can stay in the country.
But can you not split the two?
No, you can't.
So for example, I want to work for... I've studied. Mm-hmm. My mom worked really hard, single mother, put me through school. I've now qualified with an honors in finance. And one of the companies that wants to hire me is Anglo or Glencore. Must I say no?
Yes.
I refuse to work for you.
Based on conviction. Based on conviction.
That means all of us must shut down everything.
It can be all of us. Based on conviction and principle. You cannot take money from the Oppenheimers and turn around and then say that migrants must go when you know that these very families are the ones who are funding Helen Suzman Foundation so that they can ensure that our courts keep...
But he's not saying migrants must stay. He's still saying they must go.
No, but that's what... No. But he's taking money from the people who want them to stay.
Because he's pushing his agenda.
Why doesn't he take... He has an opportunity not to take money from these people because what they are doing, they're just playing us.
But who's going to give him money?
He must work for... he has always taken money from white people. Remember how he used to fry...
White people will give you money, Baba, if you work hard.
But why are we not... I've not taken money from white people. And it's based on...
Have you taken money from black people?
Yes, I have.
Maybe those black people took money from white people?
No, it's okay. But I also work for myself. But I will take money from progressives. For our research institute, there are people who fund us and they're progressive black people. But we can never take money from Zionists. We can never take money from exploiters. and oppressive people.
I want to ask a controversial question.
Yes, okay.
No, while you're answering, I want you to answer while you're answering.
Yeah.
If you think it's possible for a black person to become very wealthy in this country without, at some point, getting money from white people who benefited during apartheid or British colonization or colonial rule?
I think it is possible, and I think it will become possible if we start producing, if we are able to own the value chain of our economy. At the moment, we heavily rely on white people. But to get back to what I wanted to say, you have people who actually, as I said, benefit from cheap labor. And for me, it's a question of humanity as well. We can ensure that people who are in this country illegally go back to their countries. We can speak about the border issue as the EFF would do and say, open the borders. But as you were saying, there are issues of governance, and all the countries in the continent, they govern their borders. But it's not happening because the very companies that are funding political parties in South Africa actually thrive on cheap labor. Highest form of hypocrisy. But at the same time, as I said, they are diverting us because we look at these migrants as a problem. Whereas the migrants are part of the problem, but they are not the macro problem. They are not the key problem. Because at the end of the day, even if they leave, even if we should sort out our borders, we still do not own the means of production. We still rely on these families. And then you speak of TymeBank. As long as TymeBank is controlled and owned by a black person, that's another issue. If it's owned by some Australians, then it's not a black-owned bank.
Is it owned by Australians?
You tell me. Yes, you know.
I don't know anything.
It's not.
I know it's owned by Patrice Motsepe and African Rainbow Capital, ARC.
But we can go back to African Rainbow Capital, and you know that it's not wholly and it's not fully owned by Patrice. So we do not have.
Is it not enough that he part owns maybe?
It's not enough.
I think their technology sits in the Philippines, and I know now he's doing a deal with Canal Plus in France to buy DSTV.
It's not. Let me tell you, sometimes I ask myself, how do you sit knowing that there are white people who constable you and who constable your wealth? And how do you sleep knowing that if the economy was opened up, the majority of our people will be able to work and they will be able to benefit and they'll be able to feed their children?
But is this a black and white issue? Patrice could be a white boy. Wouldn't he be subject to the same conditions?
What conditions?
White South African guy, 5 generations here, and he wants to bring a bank and he works with Australians. The technology sits in the Philippines. He wants to buy DSTV. He's working with the French company, Canal Plus. Wouldn't they be subjected to the same thing? So
no,
you say that
they wouldn't, because if it was if it was equitable, if you want to put it, then your Penuel as well could receive the type of support. But we
have different talents.
What is the talent of Patrice?
It's better than the average white person in this country because they're not wealthy like him.
No, there are many wealthy white people, and there are many wealthy white people behind Patrice. All I'm saying...
Isn't that just business? Business partners.
What business? Parasitic and exploitative business.
That's what I was asking about black leaders. Do they operate differently from rich white people? Is it not just a function of the system we play in?
No, it's not. I don't think it's the function. And what we have oligopolies, we have monopolies in this country. And the people who maintain and sustain these monopolies are the likes of Patrice. It's the likes of President Ramaphosa. So when people speak about white monopoly capital, it's not as if they hate these black leaders. I mean, who wouldn't want Patrice to thrive? We all want Patrice to thrive. But we
all want him to thrive.
Well, I do want Patrice to thrive. But all I'm saying is that it cannot be at the expense of our majority. We have a situation where if your black entrepreneurs can be harnessed, they can also become multimillionaires. But it's not happening because white people, these white oligarchs, are gatekeeping black people from entering to the mainstream economy. And they're okay with having your Patrice. They're okay with having one black person at the table. It's not enough. And we cannot celebrate one person at the white table. And why would you want to be affirmed by whiteness when you can bring your people closer so that when they come, they can also build, they can also harness, and then you can speak of this white unity. We can speak of this black agenda. But now we can't speak of this black agenda because there are black people who want to be the only people at the table, and we can't celebrate that.
Have there been any black success stories that have been able to do that? Marcus Garvey tried and failed. Arguably, someone like ex-President Jacob Zuma's tried to bring black people together, at least from an economic perspective, and he seems to have failed. Are we not fighting a losing battle? And is it not better to maybe be the black person at a white table and use a little bit of the money they give you, the scraps, to then maybe fund initiatives like a Motsepe Foundation, invest in a soccer team and pay the players well, and other charitable initiatives, and just hope that these people will benefit? Because it's either you become a sort of sellout and gatekeeper and also share some of your crumbs with black people, or you become part of the enemy and they close all the taps and all the gates and you get nothing.
Okay. I think let's just give a comprehensive overview of, you mentioned President Zuma as an example. I think he tried, but I thought there were limitations in terms of his idea of black empowerment. And that is why if you can see now, the majority of, if you look at his administration or era, there were many people who became multimillionaires. But if you compare those people and now, many of them can't even create, or they can't even produce a tablespoon.
People have asked, where are those millionaires that Zuma created?
They can't because they were given money.
Oh.
Yes. You see the state. Yes, the
so
state,
whether you get money from white people or black people,
no, that's not. You give you give people a pond.
Okay.
You give people a pond.
And they fail themselves.
No. I'm saying that what a leader does, you just don't just throw money at people. You have to teach people how to fish.
Jeez.
Then you give them a pond.
Yes,
remember.
And they want a market. And they want a subsidy.
Yeah, no.
And they want training.
No, a liberation project. A liberation project is about liberating people mentally, social and economically. Sorry, it's not about spoon feeding people, and that's what we have done through these tenders. If you take...
that's the limitation you speak about.
Yes. Yes. So you can do as much. You take, people like Kulobuse.
Oh, Kulubuse Zuma.
You take people like... you take people like Kulubuse. Outside of proximity to patronage, he's not an entrepreneur. And we can, make many examples of the multimillionaires that you speak of. Yes, they were created. But the environment in which they were created in was not conducive or cohesive or even sustainable. So you need a different mindset, because the mindset of the liberator is just throwing money at our people. It has not worked. You need to empower them, but you also need to ensure that you are empowering entrepreneurs, real entrepreneurs. And you don't also give money to your friends and you give them to your families. You look at society, you take society. What you can even do, you can take 1,000 young people from South Africa. Then you take them to the globe. You take them to India, you take them to China. You take them anywhere in the globe so that they can study and come back, so that they can study to become entrepreneurs. Others say that, entrepreneurship, it's not something that you can study, but in our context, you can actually take people and then you take them throughout the world so that they can study, they come back, and then you give them these resources so that they can go start companies, hire people, and ensure that those people who are hired, they're also trained. Unfortunately, it's not happening. So I think for me also that's one of the biggest limitations, that even if your President Zuma would have tried, the idea would have been that, no, I want to liberate my people economically. It did not work because the whole idea itself, as I said, it had its serious limitations and was based on a voodoo economy, which for me was non-existent, because at the same time, you would have relied on the Guptas for shares. They give you shares here and then you rely on tenders. Not sustainable whatsoever. So we need to find a framework. When one speaks again to the Black agenda, we need to find a framework which says, if we start businesses, if we start companies, how do we ensure that, one, they're able to create generational wealth? That if I give birth today, my child will have a legacy. They would have some sort of, not even money, but they would have some resources that they can use. Not that you have graduates who are looking for jobs. So because that's what you are actually dealing with. So the Black agenda should be short term, it should be medium term, it should be long term. And it shouldn't even be about ourselves. It shouldn't even be about us celebrating a few Black billionaires when the majority of our people are in poverty. I mean, there's an example that is made with monkeys, that when one monkey holds bananas, that monkey is not considered to be normal. Because you cannot have all these monies in a space of poverty. You cannot have your Santin next to Alex. You cannot have your Kukuletu, your Kayelicha, Inyanga and others in Cape Town amongst the wealthiest. It means that we have humanized poverty. We have given poverty a face. And that is not what the struggle was all about. That is not what the struggle for liberation was all about. It was about equality. It was about transformation. It was about empowering our people. It has not happened. I, unfortunately, cannot celebrate Patrice Motsepe as an individual amongst a pool of Black people who are in squalor and degradation. I can't do that. I can't celebrate one man when people are going hungry. Young people are dying from poverty. And you want me to celebrate one person with billions in his account when this money can change our country, including the Oppenheimers. These are families that I believe are psychopathic.
Jeez, psychopathic.
Yes, because these are families whose wealth are created out of pain. I mean, they had to dispossess, they had to, the laws that were enacted by the colonial regime, by the apartheid regime, neo-apartheid government under the ANC, where miners can be killed because they are asking for a living wage. So those conditions are not humane conditions. I don't think, to call myself a human being and to have some sort of solidarity with others, I can then start celebrating, these successes when there is so much, so much pain, so much hate. For me, I do not know how to compare these two. I wish I did. I wish I could celebrate what people consider as Black success. I can't.
Before we continue, I don't know if you'd like more coffee, if you're fine with water.
I'm great, thank you.
You're good? And if you look at the time, because I know you've got a meeting, it's 5:02.
Okay. No, we need to, let's.
By when? It's 5:02.
How many questions do you have?
It doesn't matter. What time do we need to shut this down?
10 past.
Jeez, 15 minutes.
Yes.
So tough. But you want to come back. You have to come back. Please.
No, the problem...
no, because this is very late and I've got a whole lot of things to ask you and to say to you as well.
Okay, my problem, Penuel, is until when will I or when will other people continue talking about the same thing?
No, but me and you can at least fully unpack from our sides until we're satisfied. Then we can let other people do their thing. Because there's conversations you and I have had in private, which we're not going to cover in 15 minutes. That's what I'm saying. But I'll ask you one last question because there's a lot.
Okay.
I'll ask you one last question.
Okay.
But you're going to have to come back. Please. Mauzumoya. Upagama futhi. We're meant to be discussing the political dynamics in this country and some of the work you've been involved in since you left the ANC, which I think is something you'd like to talk about, which we won't be able to talk about today.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Thank you.
Okay.
Is India and China the models that Africa should be aspiring to, including South Africa? If so, what is currently stopping us, even at a micro scale? And realistically speaking, sorry, I also wanted to ask if you're on more paper.
No, I'm
and
good.
Realistically speaking, are we willing to pay the price that those countries paid? Including things like maybe enslaving your own people, pushing them to do things they don't want, potentially having what we hope are benevolent dictators, revolutionizing education, forcing people to do things they don't want because you have a bigger vision for them. Maybe really, really woeful labor practices, stealing IP, counterfeit goods, which, Hong Kong's became a thing. And the fact that India still to this day has got a caste system with slaves where we're like, we will push our own people because we have a national agenda where if we're not enslaving our own people, they're going to keep leaving and we're never going to develop this country. Is India and China the models that we should be aspiring to? And if the answer is no, then what is the model we're meant to be aspiring to? And what is the African agenda according to you?
No, thank you so much. Take China, for example. If you've been to the country, one of the things that you would know is that whether if you're there to study or just a visitor, the Chinese Communist Party, they would always insist that ours is socialism with Chinese characteristics. And one of the key things that they often speak to is localizing your problems and localizing them to deal with your material condition. So
localizing problems or solutions or both?
Localizing your problems and solutions. Thank you. So you cannot, and I think Julius Nyerere says it very well. He says that we have tried everything as Africans. We have tried socialism. We have tried capitalism. We have tried everything that is not ours, but we have still not emerged as a superpower. And for me, I do not think it's about taking everything that China has done or everything that India has done. We have an opportunity to learn from other countries. We have an opportunity to look at China. We have an opportunity to look at India, the very same way we have been using Western models. We have an opportunity to look at those models and to see what can work best for us and to experiment with all these ideas and modalities. We don't have to take everything. I mean, if you look at China, for example, after the era of Chairman Mao, they went to Japan. They went to all these other countries to learn what those countries are doing.
Correct.
And we can have, obviously, an external view of what they did and whether the methods that they used were correct. But eventually, we must then say, if you look at China and their education system and their technological innovation, which they mainly learned from Japan, because one thing about China is that they do not reinvent the wheel.
Sure.
You speak of IP and so forth. They just go to a particular country, they learn what that country, they take their people. Yes, they copy what works and they make it better. Look at the cars. Look at the cars that are being driven in South Africa. This look like expensive cars. I mean,
about Beijing,
yes,
about Bake.
Yes.
China's coming in hard.
Yes, so China is a good model for innovation.
Okay.
China is a good model for reform. China is a good model for regeneration. So we can take those things. But I think also one thing that I missed is China is a good model for discipline. Because the people in China are highly disciplined.
But discipline comes with Ndlovu.
It's okay.
Are we willing to punish our people the way they're meant to be punished to make sure that things get done?
Not punishment. It's the same.
They have the death penalty for corruption there as an example.
Yeah, okay, that's something else. But what I mean is, including India, one of the reasons why Indian executives are highly sought out for is primarily because of their discipline. So those are some of the things that we can learn as, South Africa and as the continent. We can learn things that are serious gaps in the continent. So we don't actually have to take everything that they have done, but there are things that we can take from those countries. Especially for me, if you look at India, what India has done with its population is that it has turned it into talent. So everything that is done in India is to ensure that they turn their population into human potential. So they are still, these are countries no different to us, which are reeling from centuries of colonialism. So they also have our problem. I mean, we also have, if you speak of the caste system in India, we also have our own challenges in the continent. If you look at the colored challenge, if you look at the yellow bone, these are simplistic, but I'm just saying that we still have our own challenges, including as Africans.
Yeah, tribalism, colorism, mixed race, etc.
Yes, so we do have those challenges. But for me, when it comes to China, there is no country in the world that has invested in Africa like China. People can call it the second or the third scramble for Africa, but there is no country in the entire world that has put so much money in the continent. If not for China, the bridges that are there in the continent, the roads that are there in the African continent, they wouldn't be here if China had not taken a decision to say that if we are going to form a partnership, a mutually beneficial partnership with Africa, we must start putting money so that Africa can develop. You cannot develop without infrastructure. And China is the only country in the world which has said that we're not going to put financial aid in Africa. We're going to ensure that we change the lives of their people because they need hospitals. But they come, what they say is we're going to help you build an airport, but we are giving you 20 years. If within 20 years you have not paid it off and you have stolen the monies, we're going to take that airport. And I guess that's what we mean, because that's what when I speak about discipline, our leaders get money, they eat the money. They get money.
This sounds like neo-colonialism, and I can't, listening to you, believe that it's with good intentions. Because similarly, look, they may not be brutal and violent like previous colonizers, but the idea of building infrastructure here is for them to be able to comfortably move our resources to them. And when you speak about business partnership, I don't know if they are paying us a premium for our resources more than the West. I don't know if they will let us sit on some of their boards, if they are willing to let us run our businesses with them. So they may look like friendlier capturers, and if that's what we want, that's fine. But I cannot believe that it comes from a genuine place where they genuinely want Africa to benefit.
Remember, China owes us nothing.
Sure.
But if they can build the roads, if they can build the dams, if they can build the airports, which were never there, who would ever do that for you if your own leaders are not prepared to do that?
But are they doing it for Africans or for their own?
No. Whether they owe us nothing, but what they leave are legacies. These are infrastructures. You cannot create wealth if you don't have infrastructure.
But colonizers also built infrastructure
Which
on the
one?
continent. Like the roads and stuff we have now.
Are you talking about South
Airports,
Africa?
highways, whatever infrastructure we had on the continent before China.
No. There are not many countries in the continent which have the infrastructure that these countries have now. If you go to Kenya,
but that's the argument for neo-colonialism.
No, it's not. Call it neo-colonial. Call it what you call it. Yeah, define it as you want to define it. But what I'm saying to you is that we need investors. Like the continent needs investors, and the investment can come from IMF, it can come from the World Bank, it can come from China. But what we have seen is that the investment, for example, from the IMF has not gone towards infrastructure. It has not gone. That's why Africa is still at the bottom of the pit. But now what you have is that you have different friends who are saying that we are prepared to assist you. But these things, they come with conditions, but the conditions are in the interest of your people.
You believe that?
No, yes, I do.
Okay.
No, yes, I definitely do. Because what we have seen is that we have seen false generosity from the West. That's what we have observed. And also, if you look at, I would mainly speak of China because China is the one that has put more efforts. They are saying that we are giving you this in the interest of your people, but we also want to benefit. That's how we should also interact with China. We must say to China, we have this raw material, but we want to build our own refineries. So that is the conversation that we are supposed to be having. I might not agree with Rwanda. I might have, my issues with Rwanda. But that's what Rwanda is doing. Rwanda is saying, okay, I won't go into detail on where they get their diamonds and some of the minerals.
Jeez.
Yes. But Rwanda is producing. So Rwanda is saying, You can build, the refineries, you can build the bridges, but ultimately we want to produce. So that is the mentality that we need in the continent. It must be, I give you, I take from you, and you also take from me. So that's what China is doing. So if our leaders are not able to have this conversation with their partners, then it means there's a problem with them. But I'm saying that ultimately we've not had a conducive relationship with the West. They've been taking from us, they've been stealing from us, they have been, instigating wars in the continent to ensure that Africa does not develop. Now, when you've got friends from the East, because we've tried the West, It's not like Africa has not tried the West. But what do we have to show for our relationship with the West? Despite the limitations of China and India, we can see a bit of progress. And that is why many member states are moving towards BRICS, because they want a level of autonomy. They want some independence. They don't want the IMF that speaks to Africa and say that if we give you your money, you must privatize, you must sell this. That's not what China is doing.
Yeah, the
China,
IMF and the World Bank have conditions that go beyond general trade agreements.
So in South Africa, for example, they will say, we'll give you money for this just transition. But we can only give you money if you close or if you shut down ESCOM, if you decommission, if you shut down your coal power stations. China and India are not saying that. They are not controlling your policies, your economic policies.
Yeah.
What they want a mutually beneficial relationship. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because they owe us nothing. They owe Africa nothing. But we can build a relationship built on commonality, that is built on common good, and that is built on developing society.
Who is the we you keep talking about? Because we've both agreed that the so-called African liberators, aka our president's leaders, are not the people. So who's the we that's meant to engage the world? Who is the we that's meant to find 1,000 young, talented kids and send them to the world to learn, copy, come back and build? Who's we?
No. Okay, the expectation would be that it would be our political leaders. But it also, and it goes back to what I said. We are professionals, we are academics, we are business people. There is nothing wrong with organizing ourselves in the interest of the people and then engaging our government, but also engaging the international community. And it has happened before. The Buddha Bond did it. The Buddha Bond did not wait for someone or some politician to come and save them. And for me, that's the fundamental problem with our politics. We're waiting for President Zuma to come and save us. We're waiting for Julius Malema to come and save us. And we're waiting for Gayton and everyone else to come and save us. But what we have seen is that no political party is going to come and save us. We the people are our own liberators. So until we take that, we internalize that power is in us. Power belongs, we are the only people who can have these discussions and then prepare a way forward. But we are so reliant on MK, we are so reliant on EFF. These people have their own problems. They've got their own priorities. But we know what ought to happen because we've had this discussion before. And I think consistently, me and you are frustrated that we've got the systems which are not benefiting the people. But we continuously, and you have said that, okay, we'll come to a point where we say, okay, this is what needs to be done. But we want to speak, and I understand that, okay, platforms are there to ensure that there are debates. But there needs to come a time when we start to say, this is what we are going to do. And we've got the best minds in this country, Penuel. We've got the best minds in this country who can do something. And, I think in closing, there are good white people. But, white people have a history of hating Black people. And
not even a history, a current.
Yes. So for someone like me, especially since they've never even apologized, it's difficult to align with them, even though there are good things that one could learn from them, especially Afrikaners. So I think it's time that we say that, look, we know what is the problem. We know that politicians are the problem. We know that politicians, they represent the interests of conglomerates. With what we know, and our love for the people, what are we going to do about it? I think for me that is critical. And in the continent, and I have, I always have these engagements with friends from the diaspora on what needs to be done. How do we take these professionals who are in Sandton, who are all over the country, who are, making so much profits from our country, all these professionals, how do we start engaging on this African agenda, on this Black agenda? Because there are possibilities. We cannot live in this world of impossibilities. There are possibilities. How do we make it happen? How do we go to your Patrice? How do you go to your Dangote? How do we go with others to say, well, if you are indeed in the interest of the people, how do we make these things work? But we've also had this discussion where you're saying that money is the problem, they're going to capture us. But I believe that if we start to pull all these resources, human resources in particular, it's going to change. We are not going to be a people that are always, looking at the problems. We're going to be solution orientated. And for me, that's where I see us going, where we are, we start being the change that we want to see outside of politics. 5 years, they're going to be debating in parliament, those who have, the people that we have voted for. They're not going to bring any substantive change. Things are not really going to change. So what do we, who are on the outside, do? Because also there's this idea to always, want to associate with a political party to be in politics. We don't have to be in politics, but we can enact change, organs of people's power. So I think for me, that's what is key and what is key to this Black agenda.
In the interest of time, we have to shut it down. But Sis Phapano Phasha, thank you so much for joining us on the panel show. I look forward to our next sit down and engagement. You said 2 hours is long. We had 1 hour 30, which is really not enough. I think it's 1 hour 30, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, please come back. These are very important conversations. And more than anything, to what you're saying about being solutions oriented, localizing problems and solutions, we need to speak to the young boy and girl, Matateni Township, Osizweni, Kukuletu, Kwalanga, and direct them and tell them, these are the 5 things we need you to do to begin changing your reality and the future. But thank you for joining us. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say before we close.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.